Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online, where the Triglavian invasions are in full swing and one has been hitting the tal as well, so it's pretty interesting. Normally they have gone into phase 2, haven't really seen any impact there on the border perimeters, but I'm guessing that things are escalating at the core of these Triglavian invasions. Lots of speculation on what's going to happen as well. We have like a world news article on the community website. We've got scope videos. We've got lots of player-made videos as well with, well, possibilities and theories on what the Triglavians want, what they're doing, and what's going to happen in-game, of course. Stuff like, will they destroy structures? Quite a few people seem to believe that they will. I personally am of the idea that, especially in high-sec CCP, is not just gonna start blowing up people's structures. Perhaps those that don't have running surfaces, so that can be destroyed in 2 cycles, but not those that are active. I mean, that's my theory. I'm not sure if they want to go that route personally. There's also speculation on like a deal from the producers of the new structures from Upwell, about smaller arms. And so the question is, are we talking about personal arms, so maybe like a link to Nova, or are we talking about deployable weapons around your structures? That could be very cool as well, of course, if you want full parity with the boss. The old player-owned structure, not structure but starbase system, then some form of passive defense is also part of that. So lots of stuff that might be happening, but of course we'll have to wait and see for CCP to actually announce any of it. Let's start out with a look at the new Eden store as well, then perhaps we'll see what's happening here. We get some bundles front and center, Triglavians of course as well, they are hyped. We still have the In Rust We Trust skin that is decently new as well, and other than that we don't really see any sales or anything special right now. In Rust We Trust 250 for a skin that's actually decently expensive. You'd probably want to look at some of these bundles then as an alternative for that. Next up, let's move on. Oh, and actually need to take something for writing and be ready for the timestamps. So next up, of course, we are going to take a look at the market. We are going to start with some plex and stuff. It's going to be at 245. Like that. And if we take a look at the chart here, we do have a bit of a decline towards 4 million ISK for plex. We have the volume bump as well with the release of EVE Invasion. That was a 15% off from CCP, but you can see volumes are back to normal and prices are slowly declining. So in Jita, we are talking about sellers just above 4.3 million ISK, buyers are down to a bit above 4 million ISK, so that's actually a bit of a margin that has opened up here. And if we go to the player-owned trade hubs, well, sellers are down to 4.1 million, a little bit above that. Buyers stay around the same range. Very interesting, definitely a first decline here since the peaks that were heading towards 4.5 million. And it is June, so I personally do think that this is the start of the summer time as well. It's a bit unfortunate from one perspective because I'm actually enjoying the expansion with the praxis. You can actually handle those Triglavian patrols in the invasion solo, so I feel like that's very accessible, and the salvaging is very rewarding. So what I've actually been doing, I can't kill all of them, but basically you try to descan down one of those patrols, you kill 4 or 5 targets, then you warp to a structure, there you regen all your shields, and of course you should have bookmarked one of the wrecks from the Triglavians that you killed. Go back, salvage, and then hunt for the patrol again, which has usually then been reinforced back to the same strength of as before. So I can't kill all of them, they go through my shields, but at 20%, you know, you land on grid with them, align towards a structure that you know you're going to escape to. They don't scram you, so you can make a little bit of loot there. bounce, get back. By that time that patrol has usually moved on, and then just grab your loot and your salvage, and it's very rewarding actually. Doing so for about 1.5 hours got me like 50-60 million pretty easily. So I'm liking the part that for now I am finding solo activity stuff in the new invasions. We were talking about plex, of course, that are declining a little bit, and so that's why I think it's a little bit unfortunate. I feel like the expansion is pretty damn cool so far. It's also going to escalate, there's going to be even more stuff, but CCP is doing so right before the summer, and I think that general activity might actually start to decline a little bit because of that, and well, plex are usually the first sign of that. Next up, we have the multiple pilot train certificate that have also been declining a little bit and going below 2 billion ISK for the first time in a couple of weeks. Sellers are still just above 2 billion, but buyers are at 1.930 billion, so a bit of a margin opening up there as well. After that, the skill extractors, of course, mirroring plex very closely since they're basically a one-on-one trade here, but you can see that the peak at almost, or just above that on a couple of days, 500 million ISK is now quite a bit away from us. 463 million for the sellers, 454 million for the buyers. Not that much margin here anymore, so this might actually slow down. You can even see that on the 5-day moving average, that it is slowing down a little bit at the tail end. But if plex keeps opening up that margin, and you can see that here we don't see that sign of a slowdown, I think skill extractors will just follow suit, and I think that plex are leading in this matter. Next up, we're moving on to the injectors. The large scale injectors are still flat at around 1 billion ISK. That's very expensive, of course. Sellers down just a touch at in the latest batch here that we're seeing, down to 996 million for the sellers, 981 for the buyers, though still very narrow margins. So here I'm not exactly sure when the decline is going to happen. It looks like skill points are still very much valued at the moment, of course. Perhaps people are starting to get into the Triglavian skills, for instance, in order to get into those Tech 2 ships. I think they're very promising. I've yet to make and fly one, but it could be very powerful, of course. After that, we have the small skill injectors. Also decently flat, a little bit of pressure at the tail end here, but basically also not at the peak price anymore. Currently selling for 199.8 million, so just shy of 200 million ISK. Buyers are down to 192, so a bit of a surprise there. We almost have no 10% margin. I would be lying here, so 5% or something like that in margin. A bit more, it feels like, than the large scale injectors in margin. And then finally we have the daily alpha injectors that went down very quickly in the course of the month of May to 60 million, which is a normal price for the daily alpha injectors, maybe just slightly above average if we look at the entire 1-year chart. We get a bit of a bounce here, but I don't think we're gonna move too much from this. 66.5 million for the sellers, 63 million for the buyers, so a bit above average still, but I think it's a normal bounce after you go down straight for 1 month. Alright, that's it for plex and stuff. Let's move on to the minerals at 8.15. And let's see what's happening here. You may already have seen on the ticker that titanium has made a bit of a jump above 5 ISK again, and is here for now to stay, it seems. I think that this might become a more structural thing as long as the Imperium is deployed in Jeddah itself. First sellers are coming in at 541, that's not bad, and then one jump out, it's 510. Yeah, a couple of sellers still 517, 518, that's what I actually saw when I was making the ticker. So lots of demand, it seems, because in the time that we've had our first few sections, the price went down from up from 519 to 541 on the sellers in Jeddah. Buyers are at 502, so even the buyers have been forced up above 5 ISK. That is very good news, of course, bringing titanium back above 5 ISK. Even historically speaking, it's still not a great price, but at least it's in line with regular titanium prices. Now, it's the other minerals, of course, that we need to look into. Here is the pyrite jump that went up above 4.5 ISK. Are we still there? 4.52 for the sellers, so that's a yes. 427 for the buyers. Definitely not that big of a margin, so a nice jump up in pyrite as well. That at least is going to sustain itself for a little bit now. I think we should see 2 billion billion units here, a billion here, a billion here, just like with titanium as well. A billion here, 2 billion here, we are going to see some sellers start to trade their stocks because of this temporary opportunity. We will expect quite a bit of pressure on the price when that happens, but the good news is you have this opportunity, and especially pyrite here basically reaching a 1-year high point. That's something that we haven't set in quite a while. Next up, we have a Mexalon. That is also alright. That's good news, I would say. Going back towards 65 ISK and even has a data point above 65 ISK. Very good, nice comeback after reaching a 1-year low of 55 ISK. 10 ISK back. That's not bad, almost 20%. Excuse me. And sellers are up to 66.7 and the buyers are up to 62 ISK as well. So here Mexalon basically back on an average price. Very nice as well, of course. Third mineral, and that makes a bit of a comeback. After that we've got Isogen. That is not doing that. That's unfortunate. It's a little bit of a bounce, but off of 15 ISK, which is basically the 1-year low point, and it's very shy. Sellers are at 16.11, buyers at 15.37, so we get a bit of a bounce of about 1 ISK or so. It's definitely not as pronounced as the previous 3. After that we have Noxium, which has defended the 300 ISK for quite a bit. In May here it really looked like we were going to go down, and it was not going to be able to do so, but together with the titanium and the pyrite jump we are back up to 325. Let's take a look at that. 322 now for the sellers, 309 for the buyers. And what you should notice here again is last 24 hours, full front page with 35 million, another 6 million, another 4 million units here. Go down a bit more, another 20 million units here. That is of course exactly what I was talking about. We have a nice spike, but you cannot maintain that forever because there are people with incredible stocks out there that have bought at the right time here, at this bottom price of 280, 250 even about a year ago. Well, some of that profit is going to get taken of course at this point, and so that is why you do see a decline and you see some pretty impressive volumes coming from time to time as well. After that we still have Zydrine to take a look at. Zydrine and Megasite were moving out of sync again. Not exactly sure why that was happening, but you see a bit of a spike all of a sudden here. 582 on one day for Zydrine, and we're trying to stay above 500 ISK. We're succeeding. 520 for 521 in fact for the sellers, 502 ISK for the buyers. Volume wise, last 24 hours not that much. A day ago we're 1.5 million, 1.8 million, so it's not that big in volumes. We used to see 3 to 5 million as a normal amount for what I was expecting one moon to do, but here, yeah, staying above 500 ISK, not bad for Zydrine. And then Megasite is of course the exact opposite. You can see this decline that has just continued, and we are once again going down. 440 ISK for the sellers, 422 to 423 for the buyers. That margin is still opening up, still pressure in my book for this to go down more, and despite that fact we are still seeing supplies, although we do notice here Zydrine last 3 days, that's the full front page here for Megasite, you know, 85, 78, that's definitely quite a bit older as well. So this is drying up now that Megasite is down substantially below Zydrine, which is an unusual situation. And then finally the outlier, we've got Morphite that is managing to trying to maintain a price of around 9,000 ISK. 8,900 for the sellers, 8,600 for the buyers. So you can still try to sell at a profit if you bought around the bottom prices here for Morphite. It's still not a great margin, but I think if you absolutely want that profit, you can take it. After the minerals, let's move on to the PI market at 1405. Like that. And let's see what's happening here. Broadcast nodes back down to a 1-year low point. Very interesting. The advanced planetary materials, of course, if you speculate that CCP and Upwell did I say Upwell in the beginning of the video? I'm not sure. And Upwell to come out with some sort of deployable arms for around your structures, then you should speculate on some of these advanced PI materials. Broadcast nodes, that's a no. Down to 1.9 million for the sellers and below 1.9 for the buyers is basically at a 1-year low point. You are buying them very cheaply right now. Construction blocks had a very good period of 12k in April, then declined towards a 1-year low point of 10,000 disc, went back a little bit towards 11 to 12k, not bad, but that doesn't last for very long either. Sellers are down to 11,000 disc, buyers at 10,600. It's basically the margin that has closed up, so fresh supply has basically squashed the price again. Consumer electronics next, that is better news. We had that same April return to an average price for 14,000 disc for consumer electronics. Had to give way as well down to 12,000, but look at that comeback, that is not bad. Sellers are back to 15,000 disc, buyers are at 13,700 disc, very, very respectable prices. And nice to see that difference between construction blocks that just isn't able to maintain that average price and consumer electronics that's actually trading above average. So I think if you have the choice between these two, you know what to focus on at this point. Now, coolants for fuels is went down to a pretty low point of less than 11,000 disc, recovers a little bit from that, 11,300 for the sellers, 11,200 for the first seller, most at 10,600 to be fair. And here we have that nice PI coolant bubble. In March went up to 16,000 disc, and despite that prices of fuels remained very low. And I'm actually a little bit surprised. Is it on the ticker right now? It's coming on the ticker right now. Nitrogen fuel blocks are actually up in price, whereas these PI materials that are related to fuels actually seem to be going down in price. So this is very unintuitive, but it really looks like the ICE products are actually the biggest impact on the fuel prices at the moment. And so yeah, maybe the isotopes and things like that might end up in the red. I'm actually trying to sell. Nope. Oh, I am trying to sell. I think it's the helium isotopes. So let's put that here. Haven't sold all of them basically. I've sold quite a bit of them. And there you can see there that jump up. So it's definitely not the PI materials that are tied to fuels at the moment that are driving the price of fuels, although they will have an impact. Of course, they're basically keeping the rise in price in check at this point. Pretty interesting stuff in my opinion. Enriched uranium had the same pattern, went down to 12,000 disc, but look at that nice little jump up in the last 10 days or so, recovered to 13,900 disc, buyers are at 13,300 disc, so we are back trading almost at 14,000 disc. Pretty damn good performance for enriched uranium. Again, we do have that March bubble that is clearly visible here as well. Integrity response drones, bit of a jump up to 2.5 million disc, which is around average, maybe even a touch above average. We can see on the volumes that nothing special happened for that, so it's just below 2.5 million for the sellers, 2.4 million for the buyers, about an average price for integrity response drones. The mechanical parts are staying pretty high, staying in the 12 to 13,000 ISK range, not bad, 13,100 in fact for the sellers, 12,300 for the buyers. That is still a pretty good performance for mechanical parts. It's mostly coolants really that have dropped out of that race. Most of the other fuel related PI materials are actually doing pretty well. We also see an interesting volume spike here for mechanical parts. So do we have like a massive seller or something like that? Nope, that all looks quite okay. Nuclear reactors continuing to do quite badly in my opinion. 89,400 for the sellers, buyers are down to 83,400. You can see the lack of buyers. I would say see this as a long-term opportunity. Buying for 83,000 is definitely below most of the chart. 5-day moving average, 20-day moving average doesn't get close to that point, so this does look like a buy opportunity, but it's been going on for quite a while. You can see that here the last month or so. We have been in this situation, and as a result it's up to you to decide whether or not you want to make that investment if you see a comeback for nuclear reactors. Organic mortar applicators next went to a 1-year low point mid-May, I would say, definitely a lot below 1 million ISK. That doesn't last forever, of course, that's too obvious. Back to 1.1 million for the sellers and a bit above 1 million for the buyers. Still below average, but of course, these absolute buy opportunities that you easily notice with 1-year low points, they tend to create some sort of reaction, of course, from the markets. After that, we get the robotics, still doing quite well, staying substantially above 100,000 ISK. Now, this is a little bit deceiving. There's actually very low amount of volatility. It's between 110,000 ISK and 95,000 ISK basically. So this is a very shallow movement for robotics, but 108,000 for the sellers, 103 for the buyers is definitely above average, so still doing quite nicely. The only specialized PI material, I think, if I'm not mistaken, for fuels, staying well above average. Self-harmonizing power cores next are not doing well. They're actually again playing with the 1.9 million low point. It's just shy of 2 million or 2 million ISK for the sellers and just above 1.9 million for the buyers. Another one of these that you could definitely consider buying if you expect advanced PI materials to make a comeback on some more structure announcements or speculation. Superconductors were trading above average last week. That doesn't last long. One volume spike here. Does that mean supply? It probably does, although I'm not seeing anything too massive here. Outside of GTA, it's not like there's a lot being traded there. So 12,200 for the sellers and the buyers are at 11,800. Basically back on a slightly below average price. Superconductors have actually been decently volatile, but in a quite a fair way, I would say. Definitely a nice one to produce and try to sell at the right time. Test cultures were very low last week, and that doesn't change. We're trading in the 6,000 to 7,000 ISK range, 6,900 for the sellers, almost 7k for most of them, and then 6,555 for the first buyer. That is very, very low. Another one of those medium to long term potentials, but they do feel a bit risky, of course, since they've been in this situation for more than a month by now. And then finally we have wetware mainframes that's also continuing to trade very much below average. We're talking 2.15 million for the sellers and a bit below 2.1 million for the buyers. Very cheap as well. Especially considering the spikes in wetware mainframes that we have experienced with the launches of other structures previously. Wetware mainframes have basically been the bottlenecks where production couldn't follow up with demand. Of course, that does depend on the actual materials needed for the structures, but that has been my experience. You get the highest percentage jumps in the wetware mainframes because basically we ran out of them. And that's it for PI. We are now moving on to the advanced moon materials at 22.25. Like that, and let's take a look at these. Of course, crystalline carbonite, well, it has been very quiet for a very long time in nullsec, and lots of that moon potential has come to highsec as well. So crystalline carbonite trading at a low point as well, came back a little bit, but still very much below average. 139 for the sellers, 132 for the buyers. Next up, we've got Fernite Carbide, a little bit of a jump here, but also well below average, coming from a 1-year low point of less than 125 ISK, now trading for 136, buyers at 135, super narrow margin here, so buyers are very quickly following up on these sellers that are going up in price. That's a bit of a surprise, but obviously, considering this 1-year chart, this is still very cheap. Next up, we have the titanium carbide that had a breakout last week and is building on that. Now that is a surprise and a very welcome one, which I think is probably going to be due to a sort of regional nature. If we get war somewhere, or if we get a deployment from the Imperium, and it means that very specifically they've been focusing on titanium carbide. That could be a reason for this, increase of about 100 ISK in a couple of weeks. That's very impressive. 274 for the sellers, 271 for the buyers. Do I have any titanium carbide? Unfortunately not, but this is obviously quite a remarkable sell opportunity in advanced moon materials. and this is of course going to be tied to activities in nullsec, which I have to be honest, I don't know too much about myself, but very, very interesting. And what I like here, because this I think was something that the viewers also told me to add here, Caldari, and then we get Galente and Minmatar. So it is tied to spaces around certain regions for sure, and I think that it shows the strength of that model. In nullsec in general, if I'm not mistaken, everything has been made decently uniform, everything is worth around the same thing, and anything is available. So CCP and the nullsec blocks have asked for and have been focusing quite a lot, especially with the mineral changes, for nullsec to become basically self-sufficient. They want to be able to make everything themselves, but you can also see that that tends to create a lack of reasons to go out there and fight someone else. And so I like either the idea of depletable resources that would start to show up in other regions that are less active, or of course you have this pattern here where you have unique resources that are only tied to certain regions. So if you want them, well, you have to go and get them, and if they're completely abandoned, they start to go up in price, and so people might want to be interested in starting up like a new alliance or something like that in order to try and take advantage of that. So tungsten carbide is still below average. It's really titanium carbide, a big outlier, an increase in price of more than 50% in a good 2 weeks. That is quite substantial. So tungsten carbide still below average, actually dropping towards 175. It's 180 for the sellers, 179 for the buyers. So this one is also trading well below average at this point as well. Let's see if there's an impact on the metamaterials. Here are the photonic metamaterials. 1 year low point, that is quite a difference, of course. Look at that. And then here, photonic metamaterials, 1 year low point, 14,800 for the sellers, 14,200 for the buyers. Try to find that on the chart. That is very, very low. I would call this quite a pronounced opportunity, although it is a gamble, of course. But yeah, photonic metamaterials, I mean, just dropping off of the chart at this point. Plasmonic metamaterials, then that is the opposite, of course. We had a low point in March of 17,500 disk. Now we are up to 25,000 disk, 24,300 for the sellers, 22,000 for the buyers, doing quite well. At this point on this 1 year chart, definitely an above average price as well. After that, we have the non-linear metamaterials. Went to an above average price of 30,000 disk. That doesn't last forever, of course, so we're back to an average price. 25,000 for the sellers, 24,800 for the buyers. Right around the middle, right there. Oh, no, actually a little bit below average at this point already. So it's actually dropping off even more quickly here. And then finally we have the terahertz metamaterials that are basically trying to defend that average price as well, but are not succeeding. 23,900 for the sellers and 23,000 for the buyers. So here again, the Minmatar, is it no, actually that's a surprise as well to me. Titanium carbide breaking out, and you would expect non-linear metamaterials to be tied to that. They're actually down in price, and it's the plasmonic metamaterials that are actually trading above average. Well, the good news is we've got some unexpected action in the advanced moon material market, so let's hope that that trend continues, because this is a slight trade to be made here. 17,500 disk, not that well, a couple of months ago, but now 24,000 disk. That's a pretty decent margin, and then of course especially this year, could have bought these for 175. You're selling them for 274 at this point. That is a super nice trade to make, of course, which I think you should take advantage of. We still have the other advanced moon materials left. Here is the fermionic condensates, back on an average price of around 100,000 disk, 101,000 for the sellers, 99,000 for the buyers. Smack in the middle of that. Ferrogel next, also up towards an average price again for the year. Pretty nice, 51,750 for the sellers and 51,000 for the buyers. Next up we've got Fullerides. These are staying below average, staying well below 1,000 disk. 940 in fact for the sellers and 908 for the buyers. 908 is pretty damn low. Hypersynaptic fibers, okay, not bad. Also trying to get back to that average price, 15,000 disk. Unfortunately, not able to defend that. We're down to 13,500. and 13,000 for the buyers, which is still actually pretty respectable considering where we've been in the last 6 months, of course. Nano transmitters, same pattern again, trying to get back to that average price. Pretty cool to see. On the lack of supply and outside, nope, it's all in JITA. 5,344 for the sellers, 5,300 for the buyers. So nano transmitters, if you grab some of these well below 5,000 disc, you get a small sale here, I think. Phenolic composites continuing to trade well below average, but also up in price a little bit, at least from their 1-year low points. 2,000 disc now for the sellers, 1,930 for the buyers. And finally, we have the ceramic fibers that are also getting back up there towards 500 disc after breaking through the 400 disc mark. So that is not bad. That's a quarter of increase in price here in about a month. 520 now for the sellers, 488 for the buyers. Definitely another trade that you could make if you bought ceramic fibers. So advanced moon materials, well, it is of course always dependent on nullsec, I think, to actually see some big moves here, but we have a little bit of rumbling, at least in nullsec, with the deployment of the Imperium, and well, we see opportunities show up because of that. So very, very interesting stuff. And on top of that, we still have some low points as well to potentially take advantage of, like here with the photonic meta materials. Let's see what the impact is on the Tech 2 ships next at 3035. And we will go over these, well, actually maybe not that quickly, because of course last week we saw that the Ares had a nice jump up to 36 million ISK. Where is it landing now? 31.3 million for the sellers and 27.5 for the buyers. So that was a very nice little jump here that people could have taken advantage of, and now we are back on the average price actually for the Ares after that. I think the Basilisk had a nice jump up as well and is actually maintaining that price a lot better than the Ares, staying slightly above average at this point. 273 million for the sellers, 252 for the buyers, when we could have bought these for well below 230 million not that long ago. That was not bad, of course. Cerberus went down in price last week. That was a bit of a surprise. I thought that we would see some Cerberus action because it tends to be a doctrine and might actually be a decent ship for the invasions as well. It's up a little bit in price, but the volumes are actually down, so I think it's basically no fresh supply. You can see that on the expires in dates as well. 253 million for one seller, then 257 for most, 260 very quickly. So this is primed to shoot up in price on any major purchase, especially if nullsec like wants a Cerberus fleet or loses a Cerberus fleet, and it's still to wait for the buyers though. So that margin is basically opening up a little bit. The volumes are not that great. This is a strange one. If you can still grab some below 210 million ISK, I think it's not a bad idea to try to do so. Next up, we've got the Crow that is getting back to 30 million ISK for the sellers and 25 million for the buyers. It's basically the same thing. The margin that opens up between buyers and sellers back to a around average price for the sellers here. The Guardian had a nice spike up to almost 300 million ISK at some point. That's kind of crazy and cannot last forever, of course. So here we do have that recovery. 245 million for the sellers, 216 for the buyers, and basically here in the last 24 hours you can see the Guardians coming in, and then a day before that, and then a couple days before that as well. So this is basically the market responding quite helpfully with lots of supply after the Guardians reached basically a 1-year high point as well. And this is why I personally like the logistics cruisers for the Tech 2 ship market. 1, 2, 3 spikes up to 300 million ISK, and here a nice buy opportunity at 200 million ISK and a second one here as well. So these are very nice trades with a 100 million ISK margin between the low point and the high point, which 2 to 3 times a year does tend to happen in the logistics cruisers on conflict in nullsec. So I absolutely love these ships to keep an eye on them for potential trades. Heretic, I would expect interdictors to actually have a similar pattern, but nope, surprisingly stable at 70 million ISK here, 71 for the sellers, 63 million for the buyers. You can see that availability is not great, and despite that, yep, the price is not actually moving. Then my other favorite aspect of Tech 2 ship markets are of course the stealth bombers as well. 1, 2, 3, 4 nice spikes, up to 40 million ISK for the Hound. Bottoms are at 25 million, but of course it's quite a bit more affordable, quite doable to grab a ship at 25 to 30 million ISK and then try to sell it at a nice profit compared to the price of the Guardian, for instance. Here the Hound went up to almost 40 million ISK. I actually made my sale at 37 million at this point, so that's pretty damn good news. If you're curious, trades made. Hound bought at 25.2, sold at 37 million. That's almost 50% profit right there. And yeah, it took some patience because I tried to sell somewhere. I'm not exactly sure where it was anymore. I bought in this year, I think January, February, I believe so. And I missed out. Yeah, I think I was basically too late on this decline. I tried to sell for 37 million, but so now on this next spike, I actually made my trade. Nope, that's actually not possible, I don't think, because that's too long. All right, I'm messing up my dates, but basically I put up my 37 million ISK sell order. I thought it would trigger, it did not. My patience paid off because on this spike it actually did. And now we're back down to 33 million and 28 million for the buyer. So we have to wait, of course, for more declines in order to create another buy opportunity here. But I love the volatility in the stealth bombers as well. The Ishtar at a 1-year low point is finally finding some buyers when it reaches a price of less than 200 million ISK. So sellers are back to 204. Buyers though at 188. That is still super cheap for an incredible ship in my opinion. Manticore, that's why we like stealth bombers. Another spike up to 40 million ISK, and we had a 1-year low point right here, less than 30 million ISK. Excuse me, less than a month ago. This is great. This is incredible. 39.5 million for the sellers, 33 million for the buyers. It's already a wide margin. This will not last very long. You can see the supply starting to pour in already. But yeah, if you bought for less than 30 million ISK and you can now sell it for 39 million ISK, that's a pretty damn nice trade to make. Love these stealth bombers. And so that is finally some Nosek action that is starting to show some market opportunities. After that, we've got the Munin that is basically going up in price a little bit, but still staying quite reasonable. 246 million for the sellers, 220 million for the buyers. That's a little bit trickier to actually make the trades in my opinion. Nemesis went up here to above 30 million ISK as well. And then back down now to, let's take a look at that, 29 million for the sellers, 27 million for the buyers. So we're obviously back below average already, but we're nowhere near a buy opportunity. And if I'm not mistaken, I made a Nemesis trade as well. Let's see if I can find anything. No. Well, I should have made one, but I'm just not seeing. Oh, I made a Manticore trade, that's true. 27.9 million, sold for 33.9 million. I was a bit impatient there, could have waited, had a better opportunity at this point, but at least I made a profit. Buying at 28 million, below 28 million, you can see that I obviously did buy at the exact right time, and thus I could afford to sell a little bit sooner on this increase in price. It cost me a little bit of risk, but that 27.9 million is basically the best buy opportunity that you can imagine. Nothing in trying to sell any the ticker Nemesis. Yeah, did I sell them? No, then I guess I decided to hold off on the Nemesis trade right there. All right, just another one, 1, 2, 3, a spike where I hesitated, but I guess I decided on not selling the Nemesis just yet. After that, we get the Oniros, my least favorite logistics cruiser because of the terrible volumes. Basically back above 200 million ISK as well. 207 for the sellers, 194 for the buyers. This one is very tricky. You can maybe risk one ship or something like that on a very clear 1-year low points, but it always remains very difficult with these tiny volumes. And then we've got a purifier, and this one, good god, that is very nice. Buy opportunities at 26 million or something like that. Now we're selling for 36 million almost. Buyers are up to 33 million as well. And that's what we're talking about. 40 million. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, 3 times in the last 4 months or so, with every time a very nice drop off to less than 30 million ISK as well. That's the volatility that we love to see in the Take 2 ships, and the Purifier here is showing that off quite nicely. It is a step up from the Hound and from the Nemesis in price, because reaching 25 million tends to not be possible, but you obviously have opportunities below 30 million that are quite pronounced, and then if you can sell them at 40 million or better, that is of course a very nice trade again. And then those that in my opinion are underperforming are the interdictors here. The Saber again staying below average to my surprise. 67 million for the sellers, 63 million for the buyers, and just not moving. After that we get the Scimitar, logistics cruiser for shields. I would have expected a bit more volatility. You can see that it can potentially happen. 250 and 300 million is possible. Here we're down to 209, 200 million for the buyers, still definitely pretty damn cheap. And then finally we get the Stiletto that went to a 1-year low point here of 26 million ISK and has recovered now to 31 million, 28 million for the buyers. Not a great increase in price, but a small trade opportunity here as well. And yeah, Take 2 ships, guys. Logistics cruisers, stealth bombers, especially the stealth bombers, very nice. And yeah, you can see from my trades made a Hound trade. I think is very respectable. 25.2 to 7 million, definitely great. And also a Manticore trade where my buy order is right, my sell order was too soon and too low, but it's still a trade made, and I think it shows the potential of these Take 2 ships for trading. What I've been a bit more hesitant about is the Take 3 market. Let's take a look at that at 40.30. But Take 3 market, I have to be honest, I think there is a lot of potential there. Here is, on the other hand, yeah, I'm saying a lot of potential. Of course, compare the stealth bomber chart to this chart, and there is opportunity, but it is obviously a much slower burn as well to get that 32 to 42 million trade. You get one opportunity basically in the last year or so. So it is different. Goddamn hair in my mouth. Get out of there. So it is a bit different, but it also has its opportunities, in my opinion. So here the Confessor is continuing its slow decline to a price well below 40 million ISK at this point. 38 million for the sellers, 35 million for the buyers. And as a response, you can see that supply in the last 24 hours has started to dry up. Bad news is it's still in respectable volume. 63 here is still quite a bit, 26 here. So there's still quite a large availability of Confessors on the market despite these below average prices, but the response on fresh supply is definitely starting to slow down. After that we have the Hecate that is doing the opposite move, going back up towards 45 million ISK and pretty close to a 1-year high point. Not there yet, but definitely well above average. 46 million for the sellers, 42 million for the buyers here. Supply is coming quite largely as well, but I'm guessing that there is lots of demand for Hecates due to Nullsec here, and so this is of course where production is going to focus on. 75, 32, 33. These are pretty decent volumes, and I do expect personally more and more Hecates to come in the market, starting to bring that price down. Confessor should see the exact opposite, should stop declining and start going up on the lack of fresh supply. And then next up we get the Jackdaw that went up to 55 million ISK. Now that was quite a volatile spike, so here the market response was the most volatile as well. You can see in the last 24 hours that we went down from 47 million to the current 44 million ISK, 41 almost for the buyers, and that's just in the last 24 hours. You get like almost 2 full pages of new supplies with 48, with 32, with 54, 64, 88. We gotta be a little careful here. We're obviously noticing an increased amount of ships on this market that is quite substantial at this point. That's a bit of a surprise to me. And next up we still have the Zweepel that's also jumping up in price, 45 million, but going back down just a touch at the end here. 42 million for the sellers, 40 million for the buyers. 19, 13, 20, 12. Other than that, that feels quite okay, but I think this is very interesting. We gotta be careful here again. I'm not sure if you guys were around here like in the last couple of years or so, but that late summer overproduction in Take 3 ship has been a theme that we've seen several times, and to me it looks like we are primed to do so. There are higher prices, Jackdaw, Hecate, nice little spikes, that's great, but this is of course due to nullsec. And then look at the market response here, 75, 32, 33, 24. In just a couple of orders you get almost 200 chips. For the Jackdaw, it's even worse. That's a lot of Jackdaws on the market. A couple of months ago, you maybe had, I don't know, a third of that and a third of the amounts here in amount of sell orders. And we still had a decent price of 40-45 million to do. So I am starting to worry about oversupply a little bit here in these tactical destroyers. The prices are right now supported, I think, from nullsec demand, but if that stops, of course, later in the summer and this type of production keeps up, then we might create buy opportunities. So that is something to definitely keep in mind. Now, last week the cruisers, so that's it for the destroyers. Last week the cruisers were all definitely trading towards low points and not showing the big volumes. Here is the Legion, for instance. And what I was worried about there is that we were trading well below average, very close to 1 year low points, but the availability actually remained very low, unlike what we've been seeing with the destroyers. And so these were primed for very violent spikes as well. Here is the Legion from 140 to 150 million ISK, 157 for the sellers, 140 for the buyers. And then if you look at availability, it's still not that great. You get 20 here, you get 9 here, but that's really it. The other ones are quite muted in volume. So you get a bit of an increase in price, nothing too major just yet, but the availability is still not great. So I'm not seeing that same increase in production, in supply in the cruisers here just yet, at least for the Legion. Let's take a look at what's happening on the Loki, staying very low as well, flat in fact for the last week. It's a bit of a surprise to me. I thought we would go up, but no, it's 163 million for the sellers, 153 million for the buyers, and here supply is definitely up in volumes as well, with 78 Lokis here, 27 coming in as well, another 10, another 11. This is quite high, and this is the reason why the price is staying very low. Now I still think that Loki's the most popular Tech 3 cruiser has its place in nullsec. If you look at this price, if you look at this chart, and now if you look at the availability, a couple of fleets and then you have a spike up to 181 million ISK, and you're currently buying them for 153. That is potentially a very nice trade, but it is a little bit of a gamble, of course, on continued nullsec conflict then. Whereas I'm waiting for the exact opposite to happen and the destroyers to go back down in price. After the Loki, we get the Proteus, also a bit of a spike up after reaching a 1 year low point. We have to be honest, went down to less than 130. It's now at 142 million. Buyers are still at 126.3. And then the bad news. Well, the bad news is that this increase in price is on virtually no ships as well. So this is just a little bit of buying, went up to 142, and this could continue very quickly towards 160 and above as well on just very minor purchases. And then next up we get the Tengu that went up just a little bit as well, but is still trading well below average. 161 million for the sellers, 150 for the buyers, and availability, you get 2016 and everything else here. Although there's quite a bit of them in the last 24 hours, the volumes are decently muted for the Tengu as well. So for the first time here in quite a bit, I'm actually seeing a very mixed picture between the destroyers and the sellers. I'm seeing the destroyers starting to show really big supplies, increased stocks, increased volumes and availability, and we are seeing higher prices at the moment, I think supported by a nullsec activity. And then on the cruisers, so here basically what I'm seeing is the risk of a lack of demand really crashing the prices down. And then for the cruisers, we're seeing the exact opposite. We're seeing bottom prices, but the availability is really abysmal compared to what's coming in for the destroyers. And we've got slight ticks up, but this is primed for a massive spike on any major buying by a nullsec. So that's really the gamble. You get two ways to go. You can either try to sell destroyers or be patient and wait for that price to crash down, or you can try to buy cruisers and hope for more nullsec action and a sell opportunity there. Very interesting situation, very unusual, and I personally now am wondering, is there basically a balance to be found as well between, well, we can only either make more destroyers and we're forced to make less cruisers, or is that not tied together? Are these two independent, or are these two actually very much basically communicating with each other? It's going to be interesting to see how that evolves over the summer for sure. And then we are going to move on to the extra product, which I'm going to try to take a look at the Triglavian Tech 2 components coming in at 49.10, because I gotta find them as well. So I think the best way to go is going to be to look for the maybe we can find advanced components. Nope, not gonna oh, it ought to be in salvage, of course. Let's see if there's a special category. Ancient salvage, salvage materials. Yeah, we're not really finding like a specific category for that, so I'm gonna grab the Ikitursa. And normally oh, made a mistake. I'm doing all of this with one hand, of course. There we go. And normally here on the show info pattern, I can go to industry, and here we will find some of these that I have been actually looting from the invasions myself. Stuff like the radiation absorption thruster. Let's press show info on that. Availability definitely quite high, but 4 million for a single one, 3.5 million for the bars is definitely a pretty good price. And I'm actually gonna move that down below the ticker so I can actually click on that. Let's try that. So these obviously you can see that they are new on the chart right here, and they're going for around 4 million ISK, which is I think not bad, and they drop very easily even from the little frigates if you manage to salvage them, of course. Then we get a singularity radiation converter. Let's take a look at that one, going for 440,000 ISK. Again, one of these new products as well, and I think that these drop in bigger batches from the salvage, so they're about 10% of the thruster. After that we get 0-point field manipulators, also I think in batches, so that's 300,000 ISK per unit, already going back down here in price a little bit. Next up we have the trinary state processor. That's 240,000 ISK. That's a bit of a surprise. I thought these were valued at more when they were dropping for me. Or is that another one that tends to drop in batches of 10? So still count as a couple of million for any loot there. And then we have the lattice locked. Man, all these names, CCP and their names, 300,000 ISK, definitely pretty cheap as well. So the big winner here, in my opinion, is the radiation absorption thruster, of course. That is actually salvage. That goes for 4 million ISK. Very much reminiscent of the sleeper salvage, where you had one outlier as well. What was it called? I'm not sure anymore, but there was one that used to be worth like a couple of million ISK, and always great to see that in your salvaged materials. And here the radiation absorption thruster, definitely the outlier. Most of the others, couple 100,000 ISK, but I do know that at least some of them, like the 0-point field manipulator, tend to come in batches of 10 and up. So these are actually usually also worth couple million at least per successful salvage cycle. And that's a new part of the EVE Online economy, an expansion of the sandbox, of course, of the industry side, because it's the Tech 2 Triglavian ships that have their way of getting these materials. I personally like that they're not locked behind moon mining. This is actually available for anyone if they want to go into these invasions at this point. And then we'll have to see, of course, how the invasions evolve in phase 2, in potentially phase 3. I personally haven't really seen or heard anything about that, but it's very likely to happen. And if there we find more ways of grabbing these types of materials. There's also talk of unique minerals coming from these invasions as well, so it could be really interesting, and I personally like that approach for EVE Online. You cannot keep building up, going Tech 1, Tech 2, Tech 3, Tech 4. You cannot keep doing that, so this is again like a side activity, a side part, a horizontal expansion of the sandbox, where you can go in here and you can start from scratch. You can go into the abyss to try and make your Tech 1 versions, and then you need to invent the Tech 2 blueprints, and then you need to find in the invasions or everything needed for Tech 2 production, and that is the production cycle for the Triglavian ships at the moment. Makes for an expansion of the sandbox, which actually is available to almost anyone that wants to actually jump in on that activity. So I think that's a very, very good choice personally. And yeah, that's gonna be it then for this EVE talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.